I want to make a blanket, but I don't do anything the easy way. This is going to be part one of I don't know how many. I have been machine knitting for about a year at this point. I have made many sweaters, I have made many pairs of socks, I've made a hat, I've made some fingerless gloves, but now I want to make a blanket. A blanket should be easy, right? It's just a big rectangle. But plain old stockinette curls in at the edges. I have a ribber, so I could make like a fisherman's rib kind of thing, but I don't want to do that. I want to make one of these cool, interesting patterns with knit and purl stitches. And that should be totally doable, right? I have a garter carriage that's compatible with my machine. This is a patterning machine, but the card reader is broken. I have AYAB, the open source project to retrofit these machines. The problem is AYAB doesn't fully support the garter carriage. So if I want to make a blanket, I'm going to have to fix that. I could hack garter carriage support into the latest release of AYAB. That would be easy to do, but I don't do anything the easy way. So I feel the need to do this the right way. So I'm going to actually put together a PR for garter carriage support in the AYAB open source project. But first, I've acquired a second Arduino so that I have one for development and one that will work no matter what with the release software. So I don't have to worry about like stopping and starting and working on other projects in the middle. This is going to be part one of I don't know how many. It's about an hour later. I'm all set up for development on the 1.0 release branch. I've got a version of AYAB up and running, and I managed to flash my development Arduino with the 1.0 release firmware. I'm going to swap this out for the other Arduino, so I'm only developing on this. This is not plugged in, so I'm not going to get shocked. Leave that in there for now, and pop on the new one. Okay. Plug it in. I'm gonna load up one of the test files. Computer beeps now. What is up with that? Okay. Interesting debug information going on here. This, I'm sure, is not supposed to be doing that. Hey. Alright, I'm gonna take this off on waste yarn. Pull it off the machine. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can't add garter carriage support. This will be interesting. Okay, let's talk about how knitting machines work. The way that AYAB or the knitting machine knows which carriage is in front of it is using this sensor here. This is what's known as a Hall effect sensor. It senses magnetic fields, so it can tell when there's a magnet in front of it. This is my knit carriage. On the back of it, it's got a magnet. See, if I change the settings, the magnet pops out. And then when this goes past the Hall sensor on the left, AYAB knows that this is the knit carriage. This magnet is oriented in one direction. And then the lace carriage is oriented in the other direction, so that the machine can tell them apart. And you can tell this because they will happily stick together. The garter carriage, instead of having one magnet on the back, because they're only north and south poles on magnets, has two magnets. And let me show you what that looks like. This is the garter carriage, and on the back of it, you'll see two magnets. One of these is north, one of these is south. I don't know which. I don't think it really matters, but it's easy in the software to say like, hey, this is a north-facing magnet, this is a south-facing magnet, select a carriage. But what we need to do for the garter carriage is be like, hey, I saw a north-facing and then I saw a south-facing, so now we know it's a garter carriage. The reason we need to know the difference between the garter carriage and the lace carriage is because the solenoids on the inside are in different places. It's easiest to see on the lace carriage here. These little orange bits are attached to electromagnets up in here. The software turns on the little electromagnets and it shoves the needle forward as the carriage passes. And if you look at the garter carriage, you can see its solenoids are all the way over here. So we need to know how far from the center point the solenoids are in order to activate the correct needle for patterning work. The garter carriage doesn't have solenoids in the same way that the lace and the knit carriage do. Let me show you the bottom of it. Oh my god, this chunky boy. The thing that makes the changes is this middle needle here that pulls out the stitches and reverses them to make them knit stitches instead of purl stitches. But we do need to know how far the center line is from the magnets because unlike the other two carriages, these ones are offset from the center. Ooh! Aha! What I want to do now is see what the current state of things is. So I'm going to hook AYAB up, and I'm going to see what carriage it's reporting, because there's already partial garter carriage support going here. When it comes to adding garter carriage to support, I'm not starting from zero. Somebody already tried to do this and found that there were issues recognizing the garter carriage consistently, and so all of the infrastructure still exists in the code. So what happens is the first magnet passes the Hall sensor and the software thinks that it's a knit carriage. When the second magnet passes, it would either get classified as a lace carriage, or if we already think it's a knit carriage and it is some number of needles away from when it previously assumed it was a knit carriage, then we know that it's probably the garter carriage. Okay, so something funky is happening. The software is recognizing the garter carriage as a lace carriage. Let me show you. So my first thought is that my magnets are in backwards. Magnets in backwards would be a very easy fix. But then I actually... I pushed the power button. Okay, so my first thought is that the magnets are in backwards, and that would be a really easy fix, even though these are in the way that the instructions say they should be. But when I was taking a closer look at the magnet, it looks like it might be just two magnets glued together. So it's possible that it's a knit and then a lace carriage magnet instead of this one being a knit carriage and this one being a lace carriage like I thought before. This should be easy to figure out. I'm just going to pry this out of here and see how the poles line up to the poles on the other carriages. Here is my garter carriage, and I'm going to turn it to KC to get the magnet to pop out. And then see the one with the dot that repels, and the other side attracts. So yeah, it's within one magnet, it's not two magnets. I think it makes my life easier. So it's a knit magnet and then a lace carriage magnet. So it must be picking up the lace carriage because it's the last magnet it sees. Okay, this is fixable. This is totes fixable. So I looked at the magnets on my KG88 and it goes lace carriage and then knit carriage, but this existing logic from the first attempt to implement support for garter carriage thinks that the knit carriage should come first and then the lace carriage. So there's a reason that they did this, and I suspect it's because that's how the other model of garter carriage works. And I actually have one, so I'm going to double check its magnets and see if it's just an issue between the KG88 and the other one. Okay, so here we have a KG95, which is the other model. So let's see which one magnets look like. Okay. Well, let's see what we do. Let's pry one of them out of there. Alright. So we got a magnet. We got a garter carriage. I apologize for all of this. KC. Let's see. That's going to be the lace side, and that's going to be the knit side. So it's the same. The marked side is the knit side, and the other side is the lace side. So I found the service manual for this garter carriage online, and it still doesn't say anything about the magnets. And then I realized, like, it wouldn't be too much extra work to detect garter first and then lace, or lace first and then garter. So I'm just going to assume in the code that if you see one carriage and then the next in quick succession, then you're using a garter carriage and not either of the standard ones. So that should be pretty easy to do. I've made the changes to support the change in magnets. I have flashed the firmware to the Arduino, and I'm just recording in case this works. I'm not actually expecting it to. I made a lot of assumptions in the code base, and it probably won't work, but we're going to try it. So, knit, walkie. Okay, something is wrong. It didn't find any carriage at all, so let me check my logic and see what's up. Alright, I found the problem. I forgot the case where the carriage hadn't been set yet, so now it should work. I figured out what the problem was. I wasn't correctly determining the starting state. There is an enum, and one of the options is no carriage. I was looking for a null value. It should work now. Figured out the problem. This connector came loose, so now we're trying this again. Okay, the software still thinks it's a lace carriage, but we're getting further. Let me explain how I fixed this. First, there was an issue with the desktop software where the enums were indexed incorrectly, so when I had a lace carriage, the code thought that was a knit carriage. That was an easy fix. I just changed these to index from 0, so now the desktop software knows which carriage the firmware is reporting. There's also an issue with the direction. Easy fix. The firmware was a little more difficult to sort out. I had an issue where the firmware immediately decided that it was seeing a lace carriage. And that's because as soon as the firmware gets all of the initialization variables it's looking for, it says to the desktop software, like, hey, I'm ready to go. So as soon as there's a carriage in front of the hall sensor, it's like, hey, we're good to go, start knitting. But with the garter carriage, we needed to wait a bit and see if there was going to be another magnet passing the sensor. Added this garter slop parameter and looked at position as well as direction and which hall was active to figure out when the machine was ready to go. This end left plus end offset is the starting point of the carriage. So I'm making sure the position is at least the starting point of the carriage plus the amount of garter slop. Garter slop is a parameter that I added, and it's just enough distance for the carriage to move so that the second magnet is in front of the hall sensor, and we're sure that we've seen it. And we're going to leave it here. At this point, I've got the software working, both the firmware and the desktop software. I have mailed off pull requests with my fixes, but I managed to break some tests in the process, so a little more work is going to go into this. I'm not involved in the AYAB release process, so I don't know when this is going to be available for everyone to use. Thanks for sticking around if you made it this far. Part 2 of this video is going to be the process of designing and making the blanket, if that's more your speed. Subscribe to be notified when that video is ready. Happy knitting!